Hi guys, Mark Dawes once again, and in this short video I'm going to start by asking you a question. And the question is this: what is the difference between a technique and a principle? And if you don't know the answer, well, the answer is as follows. If you rely on techniques, then your ability is limited by the number of techniques that you can literally think up. However, if you have the right principles in place, then you can have as many techniques as you like, provided of course they're based on the right principles. Oh, and here's another really Gucci point and good reason why principles are more important than techniques. And that is that you can't be sued for a principle, but you can be sued for a technique, especially if that technique, as I've already said, is based on the wrong principles. Now, that's a really important point. Now, the old way of thinking was for training providers to come up with more and more innovative techniques so that they could call those techniques their own, and some have even tried to copyright techniques as a way of owning them, I suppose, so that they could tie their customers into contracts, really, where you could only use their techniques and no one else's. But here's the fact: you can't copyright a technique, unless of course you can prove that it has no roots in any other system and that it, or a variation of the technique, didn't exist before you thought it up, basically. Now, the law doesn't itself have a pre-prescribed journal that states what techniques are legal and which ones are not, and there's a very good reason for that too. And the reason is because the volume would be absolutely massive, it would be totally unmanageable, and it would be too rigid and inflexible. So what the law does is provide a set of legal principles that we can apply in a given set of circumstances, and then we're judged on whether or not those principles were applied lawfully or otherwise. That's basically how the law works. So if that's the case, and we are to teach, advise, guide and instruct others in physical techniques, wouldn't it be good practice to know what these legal principles are? Well, of course it would. I mean, that's a given. It should go without saying. And there are also other principles that we can work on too. For example, if we look at the definition of skill as laid down by E.R. Guthrie in 1952, we can find that it consists of three basic things. Now, one is called maximum certainty of goal achievement. And in other words, what this means is that the person expected to use the technique or do the skill can do it on demand every time if required. The second principle is minimum movement, and this means that all unnecessary or complex multi-move component parts are taken out. And this is a major benefit to those staff who may be carrying injuries or who do not need or want to learn complex techniques because they might not be motivated to do so. It's not what they joined the industry to do. The third component is minimum energy expenditure, and this is the means of designing techniques in a way that reduces the mental and physical demands of the person who's expected to use them. And this is very important for those staff who may be at the lower end of the skill spectrum or who may not be as fit as they used to be. Now, skill itself can be compared to competence in health and safety terms, and all employers have a legal right to ensure their staff are competent at whatever it is that they want them to do. That is their legal requirement. So by applying this principle, you're creating a legally defensible course. And if you do this, you are providing your staff and or your clients with training that works and which will be viewed as more valuable than training that doesn't. Yet today there are training programs out there that teach people really complicated multi-move techniques that are difficult to learn and therefore difficult to remember and recall. So to counter this, many trainers provide training courses that can last between 3 to 5 days sometimes for staff, because staff can't do the techniques they're being taught, so they need more time to learn them. Now just stop and think for a moment. If the course has to be that long because the staff need that much time to try to learn and remember what is being taught, isn't it highly likely that what they are being taught will be forgotten soon after the training? Well, of course it will. The answer to that is yes, of course it will. Well, if that's the case, what a waste of time and effort. And this also has financial implications too. Employers lose their staff for 3 to 5 days because they're away from the workplace on a training course. The trainers who are running the training have to be paid, and additional staff have to be brought in to cover the staff that are off on the training course, and that has another cost implication for the employer. So imagine, for example, if you could do a number of things. Imagine if you could provide techniques that were easy to learn, easy to remember, and easy to recall, that you could teach techniques based on the principles of what skill actually is, and you could reduce a 5-day training program down to 2 or 3 days. Wouldn't that have a benefit? Wouldn't that make what you were teaching more appropriate and more effective and more attractive? Wouldn't it make it more legally defensible if you're basing it on good legal principles too? And wouldn't that save your employer or your customer a lot of time and money? If so, you've just become valuable. So here's something that you can do right now. Start looking at what you're delivering. Start looking at whether what you're teaching or what you have commissioned for your staff, and see if it meets the criteria set out within the definition of skill. You can also do one other thing too, and this is free consultancy for you, by the way. Ask the people who are being taught if they think that what they are being taught will work. I mean, there's the first question. Is what you've been taught working? Can they do the skills? Ask if they can do the skills without prompt and on demand as and when required, and come up a while later and check them. And then ask them if they agree with what they've been told on the training course. Now, health and safety legislation actually requires staff to be consulted on issues relating to their own health and safety. So by doing that, you are also complying with the Health and Safety at Work Act too. Then you can take that feedback and you can change your approach, or ask your training provider to change their approach if it's not meeting those basic needs. Now, if they won't, use another training provider. Go to someone else. Oh, and here's something to be aware of. There's an agency in the UK that is being promoted as some form of governing body because people believe that this agency is in some way endorsed or indeed promoted by various government departments, or that it is in some way mandated by government directly. Well, they're not, basically. I've got to tell you, there is no governing body for the use of force in the UK. There never has been. There may be one day, I don't know. But if there are people out there telling you that you need to belong to a certain organisation that is a governing body, or you can only use training that is endorsed by training providers who are endorsed or approved by that governing body, then I'll tell you right now that is a complete myth. There is no governing body mandated by government anywhere in the UK, in spite of what some people are leading you to believe. And this is the really important point, which we'll go back to talking about, which we talked about on video 1, and that is that you are directly responsible and accountable for the training that you implement and the training that you teach. A badge won't protect you. What will protect you is providing legally defensible training based on a good assessment of risk and teaching skills that relate to competencies. There's 3 things there that you can do right now. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll see you on the next one. But up till then, thanks ever so much for listening, and look for the next video that's coming your way with even more information that's going to help you move forward even further. Until then, stay safe and thanks for listening.